Hello and welcome to the Malika Writes channel. My name is Malika Writes and today I'm going to be answering some of the questions from the comment section and addressing some of the things that you guys have brought up. So the first question I'm going to answer is, have you read any of the Solomon Kane or Conan stories by Robert E. Howard? I have not, but I've put those in my basket, so hopefully you guys should see that soon in my next book haul. So the next question, what are your thoughts and theories about the post-credits scene of The Green Knight? So my understanding of the post-credits scene of The Green Knight, for anyone who has not watched The Green Knight, spoiler alert, it follows the tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a King Arthur legend. And so the film follows that very closely. And at the end, we have Sir Gawain's daughter. We have Sir Gawain's daughter who is putting on his crown. And I found this very interesting considering the fact that the supposed ending of the film is that Sir Gawain does not have a daughter. That scene where his daughter exists is a foreshadowing of what could happen if he fails to achieve his task. And if you watch the movie, you'll find all about that task. So I found it very interesting that they decided to include a scene with his infant daughter putting on his crown. And I think based on the way that the story was handled, it was the archetypal story of a boy's journey from boyhood to manhood. So I think that ending scene was alluding to the power struggle that women face with power, basically. So the general rule is that men often run from responsibility, whereas women are quick to pick up responsibility, and the two almost have to, that their relationship with power is quite different, because what we see is that women covert power, whereas men are sort of trying to run away from the responsibilities of having power. And that's the archetypal story. So we see this infant girl going for the crown. She puts it on, and it's very interesting because I think that's what it's hinting at. So that's my theory on it, and I think for considering how the story goes, it follows along quite nicely with what they've done in the film, and also how the poem is. So yes, that's kind of my thoughts on that ending credit scene. It's showing a snippet of the female archetypal journey, because we've just done the male archetypal journey in the film. So the ending credits sort of alluding that we might get this, or alluding that this is kind of the archetypal story for women. So the next question is, what are your opinions on the archetypes in Beauty and the Beast? So the most clear archetype that comes out of Beauty and the Beast is the female story in relation to a masculine presence. So what we have in relationships with women who are not necessarily fully actualized in their feminine nature is a desire for the most extreme manifestation of masculinity, which is the beast. And they become attracted to that. And the whole point is that this beast represents power. This beast represents a raw sort of masculine energy, which is all about power and bringing things into order. So the feminine exercises power by bringing the masculine into order. And that's sort of, it shows what the feminine has to wrestle with in terms of the archetypal story of what women go through in relationships. So I think that's the archetypal story behind Beauty and the Beast. It's about this woman who is taming a beast, taming a man, and producing a man who is fit for society. And that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think that's the most obvious interpretation of it. Obviously, we could go on and go into a lot more detail about the different elements of the story. So you have the relationship between Bella and her father. So her father would be the first archetypal male she'll ever encounter. So her ideas about masculinity would have been based on her father, and her father is not the most stereotypically masculine of men. And we have the other character, Gaston, who is the tyrannical manifestation of basically toxic masculinity. He's manifesting all the physical traits that we would associate with masculinity, but none of the actual values that are the most important things, because it's not, it doesn't work its way from the outside in. It's all about the inside out. So you have to have that essence in you, and what is in you is portrayed outwards. So you can't put on the muscles and have the multiple women and cars and all the things that make Gaston look like a stereotypical masculine man, but he's not, because he has none of the values. If he had proper values, then he wouldn't need to show off as much as he does, because it's pointless. If we look at our this channel's resident masculine role model, Aragorn, from the Lord of the Rings, he doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need to broadcast to the world that he is a masculine man. He just is, and everyone else can see that. So that's the other very dynamic relationship. And it's interesting that Belle gravitates towards the Beast and not Gaston. And I think it shows that with the Beast we have potential, but with Gaston there's nothing of substance there. There's nothing to work on. Whereas with the Beast, there is potential for something good to come out of that, and that's what attracts Belle to him. Not just the fact that he is this pure version of masculinity and masculine energy and all of that, but it's also the potential. You know, there's this common saying amongst dating circles that women like a fixer-upper, and that kind of feeds into this, and I understand why that is based on the archetypal story around that. But Gaston is not a fixer-upper. That's the difference. Gaston is just empty. He has no substance. There's nothing to work on with him. He's just a terrible person. You know, there's nothing you want from him. But with the Beast, there is potentially something there that can be worked on. So, without rambling on too much, the main story is about Belle's relationship with the men around her. And we see her relation. That's why her relationship with her dad is the first one we see. That we see her relationship with Gaston, and we come to her relationship with the Beast. It's all about how the feminine navigates these different types of men and how she interacts with the different men in their different stages, because her father's significantly older. So it's about looking at how she's interacting with all of these men. And that's kind of what makes the story a timeless story, because it's one of those that actually explores the feminine in relationship to the masculine, and not just the feminine story on its own. And so I think that's why it's probably one of those popular ones, and I think it says a lot about women. So if you want to learn about women, watch Beauty and the Beast. And I think that the main takeaway is don't be Gaston, because Gaston is empty, he has no substance, and he ends up dying at the end. So that's my take on that. So the next question, this came from my Masculinity in Crisis video, and it says, why are men not taking responsibility and standing up? Because I made a whole big point about saying that men weren't standing up for masculinity and they were not taking responsibility. So why is that? I think there are several reasons. There's so many reasons why men in the modern age are not standing up for masculinity. And let me just define what I mean when I say standing up for masculinity, because I don't expect anyone to go to war. There is no trench you guys have to be in order to stand up for masculinity. What I mean by that is, in this modern day, we have such a brilliant opportunity to be individuals in ways that we have not necessarily had throughout human history. This is an age where everyone's story can be told. It doesn't matter if you are the poorest person or the richest person. There is an opportunity for you to tell your story that has not been the case for centuries, for virtually all of human history. The people who had the privilege of telling their story, of being true individuals in the sense that they had lives that they could almost carve out for themselves, those were reserved for the elite, the middle class and up. So this modern age has given everyone the opportunity to be an individual. So what that means for masculinity is that now the battle is with you. The battle is making sure that you are becoming the best man that you can be for yourself. It's not necessarily about slugging it out in the streets for someone else. You're doing it for you. You're becoming the best person you can be for you. And the same goes for women. I want to become the best woman I can be for myself, and also because I care about the people around me, for them as well. So that's what I mean that when I'm talking about the fact that men don't stand up for masculinity. That standing up means making the effort to become the best version of yourself that you can be. And what we see is that men aren't doing that. In fact, what we see is men dropping out of school at higher rates. What we see as men committing more self-deletions at higher rates. So clearly, men are as a whole, not necessarily individuals, because I know that individuals are doing their own thing, but men as a whole are not standing up for masculinity. And the answer is with the individual. It's about you having a code of conduct. It's that you stick by, which takes discipline, diligence, and integrity. And I think those are the three things that are lacking in modern society. And I've spoken about some of the temptations that men face, so social media being getting more and more explicit. But you can't control the world. You can only control yourself. And if you don't have the discipline to control yourself, you're going to just find excuses to blame the world and say, well, society's doing that, so I'm going to do this. No, because at the end of the day, it does not benefit you to engage in that behavior. A lot of people talk about hookup culture, but it's mostly the people engaging in it talking about hookup culture. I don't see the point of complaining about something if you're still going to put your money and time towards it, because clearly then it's not that big of a deal for you. So for me, that's honestly the solution, for men to just be the best men that they can be, to teach each other. You know, I love the community that I've kind of facilitated, because in the comment section I see men interacting with each other. I have a few women on my channel, in my comment section, I mean to say, but I see mostly men in the comment section, and I love the fact that you guys speak to each other and that you have conversations about things that you love, because that's what we should be doing. That's what men should be doing, helping each other. I don't see the need for women to be against men or for men to be against women, because at the end of the day we need each other to further the human race. So it's a pleasure to see all of that in the comment section, and to when I go into different male circles and see how they operate, and when I go into female circles and see that sisterhood, for me that's great. That's how things should be. We shouldn't take dysfunctionality and make that our norm. So like I was saying, when I talk about men not standing up for masculinity, what I'm talking about is men not making the personal effort to become the best men that they can be. And that is not me minimizing the opposition, because I do know that society is a mess. And that's the thing. It has been a mess for centuries. It's been a mess since the dawn of time. Society has always been doing a little bit of a catch up. And I spoke about this in my last video, which I was talking about femininity. And there is this notion that the past was somehow this utopia that we have to get back to, which cannot be further from the truth. There's so much wrong with the past. And also on the other side of that is this notion that the past was just this terrible place, nothing happened, we're just so much more superior to everyone who came before us. I mean, you only have to look at some of the wonders of the world, the pyramids, the city of Petra, the cathedrals, so many things you can look at and know that, look, the people of the past were not idiots, and they clearly knew what they were doing. All that has changed is our access to information and the redistribution of resources. A lot people who are in the working class can get a lot more than their forebears. So that's really the thing that has changed in our society. So when I'm talking about the past, using past examples, using books like the Bible to talk about things, I'm not doing that from the perspective that, oh, the past is this glorious utopia, or that the past was this horrible place. History is not linear. It goes up and down, and so does our civilization. So the threat that men and women face from society is very real, and it has been since the dawn of time. We're not facing anything new in the sense that, oh, this attack suddenly came out of nowhere. It didn't. So, but it's changed form. It's something that you can't necessarily attack. It's difficult for men who are more action orientated to face the almost subliminal attack that's going on. It's going on through propaganda. It's going on through the school teaching system. So I understand that the threat is very real, but I don't know, maybe this is my African upbringing, but you kind of have to get on with it, because the opportunity that we have is that we can be individuals and we can live our lives for the most part on our own terms. And that's all that I'm asking people to do. That's all that anyone who actually cares is asking anyone to do. It's that men and women seize their lives by their hands and go with it. And make sure that you are the best person that you can be. That doesn't necessarily mean getting all the money in the world, because I know that especially in the red pill community, self-improvement always has to do with money. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because let's face it, most people are not going to be millionaires in their lifetime. I'm being very practical here. I'm not saying that you can't be. You're an individual. So whether you become a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever you want to be is your choice. However, I'm saying that most people will not. So what I'm talking about is character. That's all I'm talking about. I don't care about your financial situation or where you want to live in the world. I'm talking about the inner person, the character. That's what my channel attempts to feed. That inner person, the intellectual person, the person that in those secret times you're struggling and battling with. That's what I'm talking about. So when it comes to standing up for masculinity or femininity, it's all about having good character, becoming the best human being you can be. And that's what I'm talking about. So that was a very long-winded way of defining what I was talking about before we even get to this question, which is, why are men not taking responsibility? So the first reason I would say that men are not taking responsibility is the lack of father figures. So I've spoken about why I think that despite the fact that we've had father figures in majority of homes for a long time, why I think that this crisis has still come about. When we look at the 1950s, for example, it's looked at as this utopia. I spoke about this in my last video as well. However, that was not the case. If we look at the circumstances that people were living in, we've just had 2 horrendous wars, some of the worst wars in human history. So people, and there was no therapist that majority of people could go to. That wasn't a norm. That wasn't something that people necessarily did. And life was so difficult, you just had to get on with life. So picture this, you have men who have seen the horrors of the trenches. Let's say they didn't even go to the front lines, but they've been through horrendous things. They've seen people they grew up with, they've seen people that they knew or even just met and formed bonds with die in horrific ways. They've seen things that would traumatize even the most strong-minded people. And so you now release these men back into society. And remember, in so many places, their infrastructure had been devastated. London, for example, had faced the Blitz, which led to the evacuation of so many children to the countryside. Women had been working in factories with poisonous chemicals. So all the health implications of that, plus the trauma of war, people having to now find their kids from the countryside, not to talk of France, which had been just blown to smithereens by the Germans. So and the financial situation at the end of this, it was not looking good for Europe. Even America had to take a little bit of time to get back on track. You don't just bounce back from a war, and history is full of wars. So what we have now is just trauma. We just have trauma and people who are suffering from PTSD. You have people who are suffering from health problems that they may not necessarily have had if they had not been exposed to chemicals or gone to war. Basically, it's chaos. And the thing with the world wars is that they were world wars. This didn't just happen in Europe. You had soldiers from all over the world because Britain had its colonies, and so did France and so many other European countries. So it's a world war. This is happening globally. You have men who are traumatized and damaged, and rightfully so, going back to families who have also been devastated. And we're expecting people to come out normal and to raise normal children. It's not going to happen. So when we have a lot of toxic masculinity is trauma response. A lot of that, hide your emotions. Don't have a lot of women. Don't practice discipline. Act rashly. Be wrathful. All those things sound a lot like the symptoms of a man who is depressed, because when men are depressed, they don't tend to act in ways that are non-violent. They actually tend to act in ways that are violent. They also tend to close off themselves emotionally. So a lot of the things that we see as toxic masculinity, which rightfully are toxic, are actually trauma responses. And the fact that no one really talks about it in this light is baffling to me, because I don't see how you could assume that the men going back, and even the women going back, because you had women who were nurses on the front lines, the people going back to society, having to build up society again, where was the time to heal? People didn't get that. Then they raised children. They were traumatized. They raised children who were probably also traumatized. They go on to raise children that way as well. We're so quick to bash our elders without even trying to understand where they've come from. But if you look at history like that, you understand that we have been damaged for a very, very long time, and that has not been addressed. Therapy is something that is fairly new in terms of how people access it. This wasn't 10 years ago. Who was talking about therapy? I mean, I don't remember people talking about therapy just 10 years ago. So and even now, it's still such a taboo in some places in the West, not to talk of other countries that are more traditional. So when it comes to why men are not standing up for masculinity, I think the lack of father figures who are healed is a big thing. Because there's one thing to not have a father completely, and that's horrible, and I don't even want to say that it's better or worse, it's just a terrible situation to be in. But then to have a father who is abusive and who has not healed, because hurt people hurt other people. So to have a father who's not healed or can't express love it's going to traumatize a child. It's going to have a negative effect. It's almost going to cancel out the reason why you needed a father there in the first place. Because what does the father figure represent archetypally? They represent borders and rules and regulations, not necessarily to restrict you, but to guide you, to protect. That's the whole thing about the father, whereas the mother is kind of the facilitator of the life in that environment and make sure that life can flourish within the borders that the father has created. And even if your mum is the one who does the disciplining or seems to be the one who's more assertive, your dad still is the one who creates the borders. And that's just because it's inherent to male nature and female nature. So when I'm talking about fathers, it's such a big part of why men are not standing up, because you need good role models. Children do not learn from you telling them stuff. They learn from what they see. You have to be what you want your child to be, essentially. If you want your child to be a good person, you have to be a good person. You can't say, well, I made these mistakes and so you don't make them. No, you have to act out what you want them to do. And that's just basically the basics of parenting. So fathers is a big one. I think also the second problem, almost, is it almost, I think, almost as big as the father problem, and perhaps even bigger, to be honest, because I would put this first, but I think the lack of fathers is slightly bigger. So let's call this reason 1A. So the next reason is discipline. The lack of discipline, diligence, and integrity. I keep saying these three words and you're probably going to hear them a lot on this channel. But that is the next reason that I would give. In the West, we have become so used to convenience. And in many ways, it's a good thing. Amazon having fast delivery times and you being able to pay for next day delivery or pay for your food to be delivered or pay for this service. You don't have to write things for like if you wanted a CV done, you don't have to write it for yourself. You can pay someone to do that. So we've become so used to convenience that anything that requires discomfort seems 10 times harder than it actually is. So exercising discipline, for example. And this is something that everyone can relate to because everyone struggles to show discipline in some area or another. But let's use, for example, when it comes to women and needing to have so many women around you to feel like you're worth something. That is a lack of discipline, because if you are sure of yourself, if you know who you are, you know what you stand for, and you know what values you have, and if having a plethora of women goes against your values and you still engage in that behavior, that's just a lack of discipline. That's all that is. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person, but it's a symptom of a larger problem. And I find it mind-boggling that we've just ignored this behavior and just said, you know what, that's just what men do. No, if someone cannot control themselves, that's a symptom of a larger problem. And it just shows the lack of care that society has towards men, that we've allowed this behavior to go unaddressed for so long and just attributed it to the fact that, men do that. But why do they do that? And I think this is probably the best time in history to ask that question and to get some answers and to look at how we can help it. And not everyone has the same ethos. Some people think that behavior is perfectly fine and do what you want. God has given us all free will, so do what you want with yours. But for the most part, most people can agree that that sort of lifestyle is unhealthy. It gives birth to a plethora of problems that nobody wants to deal with. And I think that, I'm not going to say what I think personally about it, because you probably can guess what I think personally about it. But I think for the most part, people understand that certain behaviors, once they get past a certain limit, it's no longer just, oh, I wanted to do it, or it's fun. There's a problem there. And I think we've seen enough warning signs in society to tell us that, look, this has gone past the point where it's just people wanting to have fun. It's now a problem, because a lot of men have come forward and said that they base their self-confidence off their performance with women, off their performance with certain things. So it's now a problem, because no one should be basing their performance or no one should be basing their value as a human being of whether they can get a woman to sleep with them. That's ridiculous. So you should value yourself inherently. So now it's something that we have to address, and this is the best time in history to address it. So those are the two main reasons that I believe that men do not stand up for masculinity. It's one, an external reason, because no one can choose not to have a dad. And then the second one is an internal reason, because you can choose to work on your discipline. You can choose to work on your diligence. And diligence is not just hard work, because you can work hard at things and be lazy at other things. Diligence is a mindset of working hard at everything you put your hands to, and it's something everyone has to work on. We are not diligent in everything. So these are not things that you have to necessarily embody all the time, but it's a general posture that you have to have, because we're not expecting perfect human beings, but we do need standards to strive towards. And integrity being the last one, which means if you say something, if you say that you believe something, if you say that you despise a certain behavior, if you say anything about your value system, you stick by it. You're not this person with one group of people and this person with another group of people. You should be yourself. You should know yourself well enough to know that, look, this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be. And that's why that period of grappling with what you believe and really finding out what you believe is very important. So those are the two main reasons I think that men do not stand up for masculinity. And I hope that that answer hasn't been too long-winded and you guys can remember everything that I've said for that answer. So the next question, what do you think happened to Maglor after the Summarilian? So I think he just wandered the earth, wandered beside the shore and sort of just faded. It's not the most glamorous of endings for such a brilliant character, but I do think that's probably his fate. One thing I would add, I don't think he's necessarily blocked from going back to Valinor. I just think that he will not. The reason why I think that is because I think the sacrifice of Erendil, why do I keep saying his name wrong? Erendil. The sacrifice of Erendil made sure that the elves could go back, because he brought a Silmaril back to Valinor. So he ensured that the elves could be forgiven for what they had done, and they've done a lot of crimes, but you're going to have to read the Silmarillion for that. So I think Maglor was under that release. I do think that towards the end they didn't necessarily have to do what they did, but I think that Maglor will just choose to continue wandering. I don't think he'll be able to go back, which makes me feel very sorry for his wife, who he left in Valinor, and for his mother as well. But I understand his reasoning for not wanting to go back after losing his father and all his brothers. So yeah, that's what I think happened to him. He just wanders about. I have seen some very funny theories though. One where he joins a Swedish band and goes on tour, and I kind of like that. I know he was a musician, so I kind of like the idea of him being a musician in a modern age and sort of being in a Swedish band. That would be fun, but I know that's very unrealistic, and obviously it didn't happen, but it's just a fun thing to laugh at. Okay, so the next question. These questions require long answers. Do you think Sam is the true hero of the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Now, there's a lot of talk about who is the true hero of the trilogy. Is it Frodo? Is it Sam? Is it Boromir, who is the most human character? You know, and I think there's a case to be made for all of them, but I personally think that the main hero is Frodo. I do love Sam. I do think that he is a hero, but I think that Frodo carries the burden. He carries the burden of the ring. And I think we are too quick to undermine Frodo. His movie portrayal did make him a little bit annoying, but I think that we are too quick to dismiss him. And I think the reason why we do that is because we do not understand, or we neglect to think about the way that the ring affects people. There's a whole big deal made about the weight of the ring and what it does to a person. We even have a really clear example of what it does in Gollum. Look at him. He's wretched. No one in their right mind wants to be Gollum. But that's what Frodo has to stare at, because that's probably going to be his future. This ring could turn Frodo, this lovely hobbit, just full of life, into Gollum. That's terrifying. And that's if Frodo doesn't die on this journey. So when we think about the weight of what he has to sacrifice, and the fact that he knows that he has to sacrifice this, and he knew he was probably going to die on this journey. So when we look at the weight of that, and the fact that a little hobbit from the Shire, never really been out of the Shire, the fact that he was willing to make that sacrifice, that in of itself, for me, makes him a really upstanding hero. And I think Tolkien thought of him that way as well. Obviously, Sam is just brilliant from start to finish. Sam is the most loyal of friends. He's the Beleg of the trilogy. And those who have read the Silmarillion will know who I'm talking about, rather. So obviously, I love Sam. I do think he is the people's hero, which is different, and clearly people love Sam. So, but I think the hero of the trilogy is Frodo, just because of how much he had against him. He was not equipped for the task, but he took it on anyway. And I think that shows a different kind of bravery. When you know that, look, it's not even, there's a chance I will fail. I'm definitely going to fail, and there's a small chance I might succeed, but that's a keyhole of a chance. That, for me, is, you have to have a lot of bravery to go through something like that. And I think just the fact that Frodo was willing to go through something like that speaks to his character. And so I'm not a fan of Frodo bashing. To me, it's just pointless, because look at the kind of person that he was. And those who have read the books will know that he was quite heroic. So yeah, that's my opinion on whether Sam is the main hero. No, I don't think he is the main hero of the trilogy, but he's definitely a hero in the book. Okay, so the last question. Why do you think death is a gift in the Silmarillion? Oh gosh, this is one that requires a whole video to itself. I think all of these potentially could be a video, but this one in particular, because this goes into Tolkien's worldview and why he would choose death specifically to give to men, knowing what kind of characteristics they would have, and the elves. And so the elves found them more similar to Melkor. So that tells you a lot about what humans are like. And we all know what humans are like. So, right, this question. Let me try and answer this as concisely as possible. Is that possible with me and my rambling? Is that possible? But let's see. The reason why Tolkien chose death as a gift is because Tolkien was a Christian. And in the Christian worldview, death is not the end. There is a big emphasis on this in The Lord of the Rings as well, when Gandalf is talking to Pippin and he says death is not the end. So in Tolkien's worldview, death is nothing but a doorway. It's just a way to get to the other side. So that's kind of the gift. Now, if we think about the elves, there is no doorway. Valinor is their sort of paradise, and they were not necessarily intended to go to Valinor. They were supposed to stay in Middle-earth. So if all things had gone according to plan necessarily, they wouldn't have had an out of the world. They would have been bound to it, and they are bound to it. So, but men have this opportunity to go to the world beyond, and that's a whole different discussion, because Tolkien was a professor of folk tales, and he knew a lot about the fairy realm. So that's the world beyond. And even in the Christian worldview, the world beyond for us would be heaven. So men have this way out where they can choose to live. In fact, the people of Numenor could choose when they wanted to leave, because they had extended lives, so they could just choose, you know what, today I feel like dying. And they could leave the world. So I think the gift is the fact that you can escape this world and its troubles, and you're not bound to it. But men did not look at it that way, because they cast their treasures here. They put their treasures here in the world, and they soon found out that they wanted to stay with their treasures. They did not value the world, mainly the world beyond, mainly because they didn't know that much about it. So because it was shrouded in so much mystery, there was fear associated with it, and men did not look at death as a gift. But the way that death was intended was the fact that you didn't have to remain bound up with the fate and the fortunes of this world, whereas the elves did not have that privilege. So I think that's the concise version of why death is viewed as a gift. If I had to fully talk about this, then this video would probably be an hour long. But I'm going to end the video here, and I'm probably going to... I'm going to take a video and just discuss some of the concepts in Tolkien's work, because I think that's probably going to make for an interesting video. You guys let me know whether you would like that in the comment section, and we can do something like that. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope that I've given you something to think about, and I can't wait for your comments so that we can discuss this further in the comment section, and I'll probably take some of the things in the comment section and just expand on them in another Q&A. So thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this with anyone you think would like Tolkien or like any of the things I talk about. And yeah, this has been the Malika Writes channel.